they couldn't complete that pass. And then you lose a couple balls and you're away from home. As you mentioned, Inter in a really difficult place to play. And now you feel like you're getting suffocated, right? Everything just keeps coming and coming, and they never got a grip of the game at all.
Rella, what do you got to say about Juve today? Surely nothing but love after that performance.
Was the first time I saw Juventus performance in a very long time. I think Thiago Motta, Tony says as a joke earlier, he's going to have the first night of sleep, good night of sleep in a long time. They dominated the game from start to finish. Normally, that's what it's like. You go to Torino, you go to Juventus Stadium. It's a difficult place to go and play football. It's a difficult place to dominate possession. Milan weren't able to find any of that. I thought there was excellent performances all over the field. Looked like an old Juventus, like a DNA of the Juventus side that I recognize from when they had the big players and the big moments. And by the way, they did it without Vlahovic, without a striker. They did it with guys in different positions, and they did it without Koopmeiners, because I thought he was also very poor again today. Without Douglas Luiz, without their major signings. So if I'm Thiago Motta, I look at this performance as a benchmark to say, who were the guys that I could count on this one? And I know there's a few. McKennie's one of them. Weah's one of them.
Locatelli's
one of them. Locatelli was okay. Had a very good game.
Locatelli was very good.
Was very good today. Locatelli. But you have to look at this game and say, we did it with these guys today. And the guys that are not doing it for you, you got to be careful, because that's where your inconsistencies are coming from.
And a clean sheet as well against a team that just beat you 2 weeks ago in the Super Cup.
Yeah, this is the Juventus that every Juve fan wants to see. A team that was hungry. They looked rabid. Every time that they wanted the ball, they were pressing the opponent. They were picking up on all the mistakes. And finally, Juventus came out better in the second half than they did in the first half. That's where they completely suffocated Milan.
Why all these first halves?
I think it's an attitude. It's a mentality. It's a character standpoint. We've spoken a lot about the team being young and trying to learn from their mistakes. Finally, the things were clicking the right way. Tim Weah comes on and he gives that speed in behind that I think Juventus were desperately needing. That's what we kept saying in the first half. But this is how Juventus is supposed to look. This is the foundation, the building block for Thiago Motta to go on and to finally get some wins. I think they were absolutely desperate for it.
And as good as it was for Juventus, Tony, it's equally as disappointing for Milan, especially if you're Conceição.
Yeah, no magic at halftime here today to come out in the second half. Juventus just steamrolled them for 90 minutes, and that was the question for Juventus. That was also the question for Milan. What would change at halftime? And only one team had their foot on the pedal for 90 minutes.
How much was Christian Pulisic a miss today?
He's a massive miss, because if you're going to set yourself up in a counter-attacking style, Christian is one of those guys that can get out on the break, and he does such great things. Leao was a little bit off the pace today, although had a moment here in the first half. But yeah, I don't think Conceição is going to be happy with this one.
You know,
no cigars, no dancing today.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I think a big aspect was the midfield. When she's mentioning who was missed, the midfield from Milan compared to the midfield of Juventus, where Thuram and Locatelli were able to dominate. You saw Benacer and Fofana, who were just making mistakes back to back, and that is where Juventus got that momentum.
And Tony, you even said, forget Kyle Walker, that's what the target is in this January window. They've got to bring someone in the midfield.
Yeah, Poppy, I'll be honest. I have not been impressed with Fofana the entire season. Benacer, okay, we can make an excuse coming back from injury. We look at 2 years ago what he did, and it was a decent season. But so far for me, what I thought we were getting, Milan was getting in this midfield, I haven't seen it.
Here's a look then at the top half of the table for Juventus. They've overtaken Lazio, who still do have a game in hand. Napoli, they're at the top of the table with 47 points. They're going to take on Atalanta this afternoon in Bergamo. A win for Gasparini's side puts them only 1 point behind Conte's team in the Scudetto race. And Milan, they slip all the way down to 8th place in the table. Obviously, for Milan, they've got to walk away from this feeling so disappointed. I mean, yes, they miss Christian Pulisic. They're missing Morata. There's a bunch of players that weren't available for today, but so will Juventus. Tony, when Conceição reflects on this game, what will he be most disappointed with?
Well, I think they set up as a counter-attacking side today. They were a little bit deeper, but that first pass, the pass, that breaks the play, that gets you into the front, they couldn't complete that pass, and then you lose a couple balls, and you're away from home. As you mentioned, Inter in a really difficult place to play, and now you feel like you're getting suffocated, right? Everything just keeps coming and coming, and they never got a grip of the game at all. And the second half, it just, okay, at the end, when they've made some substitutions, they had a few opportunities, but you never felt like Milan had a chance today.
Nope. Absolutely not. And I think it's more than just missing Pulisic and missing Morata. I mean, the attitude of the team was not great. And you mentioned it before, but in many of the matches, 3 out of the 4 wins that Conceição got, it was not a really good first half. It was actually very poor first half. Against Juventus in the Supercoppa, against Inter, where they were down 2-0, and then the last match against Como, where they're down, and then they come back and they have their reaction. And we kept waiting for it. We thought that Juventus were not going to take advantage of their opportunities, and Milan were going to be able to hit them, which seems like Conceição's move, but they didn't have it. And again, I keep going back to the midfield and the ability to not string those passes along. I don't know how the attack is supposed to click if they can't even get the ball to them. And then so many individual errors that with the Juventus press, with that attitude, with that energy, we're able to take advantage of their opportunities.
They lost the game in the midfield. Tony makes a great point with Fofana and Benacer against Locatelli Thuram. They lost that battle a million times over. And then it makes me wonder when I think back to Pioli and how he won the Serie A with that back line. I'm not quite sure how he won with this back line with Calabria, Teo Hernandez, Tomori, and
Kalulu was on the other side.
Kalulu was on the other side, but Teo Hernandez has been so poor for them, like defensively. He just invites guys in to come in. He didn't attack really today, so he doesn't really give you too much. Emerson Royale's he's all over the place.
If
not
Kyle
good defensively.
Walker was playing today, because he's the one that's rumoured to come in, would he have made that much of a difference? Can you even pin it on Emerson Royale?
I'm not
tough
sure.
one.
I'm not sure. And I think another takeaway for me was Conceição, and like we still don't really even know what his playing style is now through 5 games. They haven't kept one clean sheet with this back line. And you know, today they played in the counter. Were they forced to play in the counter? I'm not so sure. And it's just not clear what Conceição is going to do. Tony says they probably need a midfielder. Looking at that game, you would agree, but they also need pieces at the back.
Do you think it's even on their radar? I mean, Marcus Rashford's been the other one, but does he fill that hole?
It's unbelievable that they've been able to. They're investing money over the last 2 years in making changes to get better, and they've got progressively worse. And I think that's got to be a major frustration for Milan fans. Since they won the Scudetto, they've found ways to get where they invested money and tried to get better and actually effectively have gotten worse.
Which is surprising, isn't it? Because we all sat here in the transfer window and said they've brought in really good key pieces. Obviously, they lost Giroud and some big pieces that were a huge part of that Scudetto winning team. But then they bring in the likes of Morata and strengthen in some areas. And it made you feel like Milan was really going to do something this season. Well,
the 2 big signings were Pavlovic in the back, right? He might not be here at the end of the transfer window, and was Fofana in the midfield, right? And of course they brought in Emerson Royale, but I don't know what we expected from him. Fofana, they're not going to change him, in my opinion. I think they need to get more out of him. Maybe the partnership with who he has next. I don't know what the answer is, but what I saw in France from Fofana is not the same player we're seeing in Milan right now. And that part's got to change, because I'm still a believer that you have to dominate the midfield to be good. And, you know, when you give balls away and you give, Timothy Weah comes in and he was active the entire second half. These are the things that happen to you. Marco, you hit the nail on the head. If you can't build through the midfield at some point, the guy that you can put an outlet pass to, if you're going to play on a counter, it's going to be really difficult.
I feel like the Milan are just very imbalanced. And that's why we sort of have these up and downs where there's extreme talent within the squad. I mean, anybody could point it out. It's obvious if you watch one game who the most talented players are. But then there's not this foundation, the strong unity. And I go back to the match against Inter, where I watched that back line, the high line that Milan were playing. And I said, any bit of speed that Inter would have had in that game, you pick them apart. And look at this. When Tim Weah comes on, that burst of speed, and boom, you're in at the back. If you're not solid there, you're always going to be chasing matches. And I just feel like I'm seeing that same issue over and over again. Have they gotten away with it? Yes, they got away with it in the 2 matches in Saudi Arabia. But you're not always going to get away with it, especially with the team as well organized as Thiago Motta's team was today.